Okay, we are at 7 o'clock. Just want to do a quick sound check from the control room. Can you guys give me a thumbs up if you can hear me okay? Thumbs up. Thank you, Tom. Former Hub staffer, Tom Skinner, with the thumbs up. Okay, we're going to bring the 23rd Annual General Meeting for Hub Cycling, calling it to order. We have well in advance of what we need for quorum. I think we're looking at currently 83 participants, which is a fantastic turnout. We've gone through some of the protocol for this virtual AGM. Many of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the Zoom meetings from work and family and friends, but we will be doing some motions that will require your vote, and we'll help you run through that. And so let's get started. My name is Derek Wenman. I am the president of Hub Cycling, and I'll be your host for this evening. There'll be a few other speakers joining me. Hub Cycling wants to acknowledge that this meeting taking place in my particular case in the city of Vancouver is on the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. Of course, your mileage may vary. As you guys are all remote, you may be in different territories. I do have it on authority that the Mayor Coquitlam may be joining us as a participant tonight. So you may see him in one of the chat windows. We, as I mentioned, are broadcasting from our control room at 312 Main. So I want to give a heads up and a thank you to the staff on site with me, Navdeep, Sheena, Kathy Acuna, Jennifer Rai, Zoe Christian, and fellow board member Chantel Chan. They are in a separate room for me, but have been doing the majority of the work to get this set up and going. Those of you who have attended our previous AGMs, we previously held it on Saturday. It ends up being a 3-hour plus long event. And the board decided a while back to move the AGM to a weekday. This is pre-pandemic, trying to encourage participation. So we tried to move it to a weekday evening, and of course, pandemic occurred, so we stuck with that plan. We've significantly shortened the length of the AGM. We're hoping to get you guys all out of here by 8:30 because no one wants to be on a Zoom call for 3 hours. And in keeping with that, a lot of the usual reports that we'd have in person, we've typically had local committees reporting in person. Those are, and other reports, those are going to be online. So let's move forward. One other couple points of order, we'll be doing electronic motions. Happy to help you out through that. I think Jen covered that a little bit previously. There is the chat question and comment ability. And if staff feel anyone's being appropriate, they'll let you know. And they may remove somebody from that meeting. So in the words of Bonnie Henry, be kind, be calm, be safe. When commenting. Want to introduce our guest speaker. So she was elected in 2017 as a BC NDP member of the Legislative Assembly, Bowen Ma, MLA for North Vancouver Lonsdale, and she's got a message for us. So roll
and thank you so
video.
much for having me at your Hub Cycling Annual General Meeting. My name is Bowen Ma, MLA for North Vancouver Lonsdale, and I'm coming to you from North Vancouver, the territory of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. Now, as Hub Cycling members, you should all be very proud of what you've accomplished. Your advocacy work has changed the course of so many projects and local government priorities. I think, for instance, of the work of Angie Wall, Don Piercy, and Erica Rathje out here on the North Shore, and their influence on projects like the Mountain Highway Interchange. All over the province, Hub Cycling members encourage governments to look beyond the car, and it is paying off for British Columbians all over the province. I have to admit, a lot has changed since COVID-19 about the way that we live our lives, and most certainly about the way that we travel. Some good, some not so good. For instance, transit ridership dropped like a stone, and there is definitely concern that we'll revert back to the car-centric transportation systems that we've been working so hard to try to evolve away from. But we've also seen how cities can fill that void that was left by rapid declines in public transit usage during the first couple of months of COVID-19 with more active transportation. We've seen cities get quite creative, opening up car-free roads to encourage walking and cycling, and I personally feel as though I have never seen more casual bike riding in the communities around me than there have been during COVID-19. Road space is being repurposed for people rather than for parking, as communities work to expand patios and other services out onto roads that were previously reserved only for big steel cages that ran on 4 wheels. In North Vancouver, where I live, the City Council voted for and implemented an open streets plan that rapidly reallocated road space for use by people, doing in weeks what probably would have normally been held up by years of hand-wringing and public debate over the value of parking spots. British Columbia is also fortunate to be a place with abundant, clean hydroelectricity, which is important as we continue to do our part to tackle that other major worldwide crisis, climate change. And as terrible as COVID-19 has been for our economy, our businesses, industry, and the health of people, sadly, there is still an opportunity that we cannot fail to take advantage of as we work to rebuild and restart here in BC. And that opportunity is to rebuild our economy with a deliberate and concerted emphasis on more environmentally, socially responsible industries, practices, and behaviors. And transportation is one of the most important sectors for us when it comes to reducing GHG emissions and doing our part to tackle climate change. So as economic activity grows, as it has already, the number of trips that will occur will also grow. We're seeing that all over. And how those trips are taken matters a lot. A lot of folks have gone back into buses, but others have gone back into their cars. And the question is whether or not we'll be able to enable the continued embrace of active transportation that we've seen during COVID-19 so far. Now, a lot of this will depend on where we invest money as we move towards recovery. Induced demand is a very real phenomenon in all modes of transportation, which means that what infrastructure we choose to fund will in effect become a self-fulfilling prophecy of how the behavior of travel habits are shaped. So, this was launched 1 year ago, Move, Commute, Connect. That's BC's strategy to double the trips taken by active transportation within 10 years. And it's also part of Clean BC, which will continue to be our climate action strategy. That's the strategy that commits us to reducing overall GHG emissions in our province by 80% by 2050, 60% by 2040, and 40% by 2030. It's a really important step forward, but there's still a lot of room for BC to do even more investments in active transportation infrastructure, even more changes to laws that help keep cyclists and pedestrians safer, and perhaps as a keystone to all of this, cultural changes, an evolution in the way that our society views cycling and people who cycle. Now, advocates like yourselves have been calling for changes to the Motor Vehicle Act for years, as well as increases in penalties like those for dooring, which our government recently quadrupled to being on par with excessive speeding and distracted driving. But you know as well as I do that there is still a lot more to do. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the pandemic has changed a lot about the way that we move around. Working from home and video conferencing meetings have become a mainstay in our households, seemingly overnight. And telecommuting is likely here to stay. But to what extent it will permanently replace physical commutes is quite hard to say right now. But there are some things that we know will still not change, even with COVID-19. For instance, people will continue to want safe, integrated, efficient, and affordable ways to get to where they need or want to go, which means that we must continue to strive for forward-thinking transportation systems and networks that meet the needs of people. We also know that space in urban settings will continue to be limited, which means that the endless expansion of lanes on roads and highways still won't be the right way forward for urban mobility, and that the building of complete communities where people are able to live, work, play, study, and shop without a lot of travel will still be very important. When the pandemic is over, there's also very little doubt that climate change will still be an issue that we must pull together to resolve for the sake of our children's futures, which means that we must continue to reach for low carbon footprints in whatever transportation systems we enable. Active transportation is definitely one of those awesome systems for this. And the most essential work of our society, sadly, will likely still be done by some of the least paid workers in our communities. We're talking cleaners, care aides, grocery store workers, early childhood educators. These are people who cannot afford to live close to where they work and will therefore have to travel further per dollar earned on a day-to-day basis than those who occupy well-paying professional jobs. And that means that whatever happens with COVID-19, our transportation systems will still need to be designed with awareness of the inequality that exists in our communities and an intention to enable greater socioeconomic justice. All of this means that the commitments the province, our government has made prior to COVID-19 to invest in public transit, to invest in affordable housing, to working with local governments in order to create livable communities, to increase active transportation and enable micro-mobility will continue to be incredibly important as we move forward through and eventually out of this pandemic. As I'm talking to you, I'm reminded of a 2019 study, and it was titled The Social Cost of Automobility, Cycling, and Walking in the European Union. And it calculated that for every kilometer driven by a car, society incurred a cost of about 17 Canadian cents, whereas cycling and walking brought benefits to society of 28 to 58 cents per kilometer. And while there are still transportation routes, especially in northern BC and in the interior, where we have few options other than to invest in highways, there are definitely opportunities, particularly in more populated areas, to choose how we encourage travel behavior to rebound after the pandemic. Which brings me to you and your role in all of this, because your role is critical. If COVID-19 has taught me anything, it's that humans can pull together to do incredible things when we're willing to put the needs of our communities and safety of our loved ones ahead of our desire for the illusion of personal convenience and profit. But that level of organizing doesn't happen on its own. You know that as well as I do. The work of showing the public, policymakers, and other leaders about what can be, can't be left to chance. It takes a concerted effort by people with vision who are willing to educate and push for what needs to be done. In short, it takes people like you. So I want to thank you for joining us today, for being a part of Hub, for charging ahead in the work that you do to advocate for safer, better transportation networks for people who walk, cycle, and roll. Because really, you're helping us bring British Columbia forward into a better place. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Bowen, for that message. We're going to move on to some housekeeping. We're going to have 3 motions coming up, so get your fingers ready, everybody. These are just basic motions that we need to take care of to move the agenda forward. The first one is the approval of the 2020 agenda. So I'm going to make a motion that we approve the 2020 agenda, and I'm going to need a seconder for that.
It's Jeff. I second that motion.
So the seconder for that motion is Jeff Lee, and everybody get your voting fingers and give us your vote. What's that? Thank you. Okay, well, with 90% of folks having voted, we're at 64 approved. So that motion is passed with the majority. Let's move on to the next motion, which is the approval of the 2019 AGM minutes. And so again, I will be making a motion to approve the 2019 AGM minutes, and I'll need a seconder for that.
Jeff Lee, I second that motion.
So we have Jeff Lee seconding, and on to the voting. Okay, and we've got a majority there. We've got 75% voting in favor, so that motion is passed. And the final motion that we're going to move on today is the nomination of an elections officer. That person, we've decided this year, Corey Bonick, who's an outgoing board member, has agreed to take on this role. She has no vested interest in the voting, so makes sense for her to be our elections officer. So I move that we approve Corey Bonick as the elections officer for the AGM. I will need a seconder for that.
I second that motion.
Thank you, Jeff. Seconded by Jeff Lee, and on to the voting. Okay, with almost 90% voted, we have a approval, 100% on that one. Thank you, Corey. You have been voluntold as the elections officer. Moving on, quick introduction to the directors. Being a board member can sometimes be a challenging role. There's lots of time that people put in, so I want to acknowledge both the current and outgoing board members. I'm sure many of you have met them at events. Outgoing this year, Neil McEachran, and if you guys want to throw your screens on when your name comes up and give a wave or hello, you're welcome to. Neil McEachran is outgoing this year. Corey Bonick, who we just mentioned, she's been both secretary and chair of board development committee. Dave Bramsley. Current board members, Jeff Lee, our vice president, who you will be hearing from next. Matthew Alexander, our treasurer, and you'll be hearing from him later. Ty Sylvie, Shireen Chin, Matt Strand, Julie Fashan, Genevieve Bowers, and Chantel Chan, who is on site with me. Thank you guys for all the work that you do. So there's a few reasons that we're here. A large part of why we're here is as members to hear updates on what's going on and how our organization has grown or fared over the last little while. Some portion of that is certainly adapting to the challenges of this time and adjusting and affirming the direction the board has taken in the past year. And specifically, you would have done the latter part of that by voting over the last week We'll be announcing the results of that later on, so stay tuned. With regard to how the organization has fared over the last while, it's certainly been a challenging time. I do want to specifically thank Navdeep. He came in as acting ED in January, February of this year, and we promised him an easy time of it. And a couple months later, he had an incredibly challenging role, and he's done a great job along with all his staff who have adapted really well to working remotely and all the challenges. So thanks to all the staff. Moving on in the agenda, we're going to get an update on our mission and strategic plan. That's going to come from Jeff Lee. If you have questions, comments on that, again, that goes in the chat window, and we're going to do a chat check-in in a couple items after that. But on to you, Jeff Lee. Are you prepared, Jeff?
I am prepared. Thank you.
Good stuff.
I'll look for a thumbs up from you. Just say you can see a screen and you can hear my voice. Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's fallen to me to give an update on our strategic planning process. We have run 5-year strategic plans. The last 5 years, that plan wrapped up in March, and we had spent about 4 months getting ready for our next strategic plan. And we completed it during the past months of COVID and some remote meetings and so on. So this is going to be a sort of a short update that talks about what we're thinking is our goals and our what we're setting out to accomplish in the next 5 years, running from 2020 till 2025. So this is running from April 20 to March 2025. It's very much based on our previous 5-year plan. We want to build on our success. We don't want to reinvent the wheel here, but we also want to think about what has changed in our environment and highlight what we want to focus more on. So it's an evolutionary plan, not a revolutionary plan. Our mission remains the same. We reconfirmed this through workshops and so on with all the existing directors, and our mission remains getting more people cycling more often. Our vision is that by 2025, more people in BC cycle as a preferred mode of travel and recreation, and that choice is supported by a culture that sees cycling as an essential mode of transportation, one which helps create livable, connected communities and healthy environments. We see that all levels of government will demonstrate their commitment to Vision Zero through education, policies, and by increased investment in safe and comfortable infrastructure. So that's our paintbrush where we've painted the future we'd like to see. As we navigate towards that, we wanted to reaffirm the values that we use to run the organization. What's important to us. This helps us guide decision making and helps we can hold these up and say, are we thinking about this? And I think it's worth noting that at every board meeting we review our mission and we review our values to think about how are we living to our values and are we doing what we said we would set out to do. So we've got some core values that we've agreed to. The first one is around community and the belief that cycling is an exceptional catalyst for healthy, happy, connected, and livable communities. We have a core value around sustainability and the role that cycling plays in that, and that's both social and environmental needs for people of BC. We have a value around collaboration. It says we want to work with all stakeholders. That's the general public, the private sector, and the public sector, because we've seen that the best results for improved cycling infrastructure, training, and promotion come from when we work together and not confrontationally. We have a value around inclusivity. We welcome and celebrate the diversity of all British Columbians through our work. We recognize that socioeconomic and cultural barriers must be acknowledged and considered through our advocacy, training, and promotion. We have a value around innovation. Through the power of creativity, proactivity, and innovation, we'll adapt to and create new opportunities to introduce positive change and to reach more people. And our final one is around responsibility, about being accountable to our members, our supporters, and the general public in our promotion, education, and advocacy for cycling improvements. We believe in evidence-based decisions, transparency, integrity, and that dialogue is also core to how we conduct our work. This is intended to foster trust among all stakeholders. We've set 10 top-level goals for what we want to focus on driving the organization towards over the next 5 years. And the first one is an expanded cycling network, and we'll focus on infrastructure that is comfortable for most users. We'll change that, I'll say safe and comfortable. A network of strong hub cycling local committees that drive improvements in cycling infrastructure, education, promotion in their own communities. We believe that the local committees know their communities best and want to empower them to drive the change in their communities. We have a goal around improved and expanded safety education for users of all transportation modes. We have a goal around a modernized BC Motor Vehicle Act. Let's actually not call it a Motor Vehicle Act, let's call it a Highway Safety Act, and other legislation to improve road safety and accountability for all. We want to be BC's trusted resource for cycling infrastructure, education, and promotion. We want to strengthen relationships with the communities we currently serve and expand with new communities, whether those be geographic communities or communities of people with defined interest or concerns. We want to expand participation in our current programming and bring on new programming to attract new user groups. Expand and diversify our funding sources so we can maximize our impact and sustainability. We specifically want to increase cycling among groups that may face social, cultural, and/or financial barriers. And we want to better capture and utilize data that supports evidence-based decision-making. As we work towards those goals, we've set some high-level key performance indicators. And we talk about things like and this is not going to be exhaustive because this is a 10-minute summary of this strategy, but we're talking about things like the percentage of Metro Vancouver children we reach with our education programs, the results we get through local committee action work, how we're seen in the media, how many mentions we can get in both traditional and social media, how many people are participating in our events, our financial performance against budget and against cash flow requirements, and how many gaps we're closing in the network. Are we closing those critical gaps and making it easier for people to make journeys cycling? And the specific targets we put in place by 2025 are that we want to, by that point, be reaching 100% of Metro Vancouver children, that sometime in between when they're in grades 4 and 7, we will have reached all of them. We want to see a BC Road Safety Act that recognizes active transportation, protects vulnerable road users, and hold all road users accountable. We want to see a mode share target of 4%, recognizing that the last baseline we have from a census for people cycling to work, and it's just one way of measuring it, but that was 2.3%, and we're driving to get that to 4% by 2025. We also, based on our state of cycling work and our inventory of cycling routes and our assessment of existing infrastructure, we determined that in Metro Vancouver, 65% of the population was living within 400 meters of a safe cycling route. And our goal is to get that to 80%, which means targeting where we are working to improve this infrastructure. So I'm going to leave it there, but I say there's lots more details available if you're interested. Board members can certainly be happy to discuss this with you and explain in more detail. The strategic plan is a high-level plan, but it's supported by annual action plans that are created by staff teams, board committees, and local committees. And we expect that those annual plans will show steady progress towards our 2025 targets. Thank you. If there are any specific questions, it's a good idea to put them in the chat window, and we'll have a couple of touch points where we can come back to them. Thank you, Derek.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. Yeah, the strategic plan is definitely something that there's a lot of work that went into, and it is, as Jeff mentioned, something that the board reminds itself that it is working towards at every board meeting, so an important document indeed. We're going to move on to the next item on the agenda, which is our year in review slideshow for Navdeep, and I'll just take a quick pause here and he's going to jump in.
Thank you, Derek, and hello, members. Good afternoon. My name is Navdeep, and I'm the Director of Communications at Hub. For the past 6 months, as Derek mentioned, I was the Acting Executive Director. As a settler in Vancouver, it is my privilege and honor to live and work on these unceded lands of the peoples of First Nations. It is also my privilege to take the stage today on behalf of all Hub staff and volunteers to share the meaningful gains we have made in getting more people cycling more often during the last fiscal year, which spans from April 1st, 2019 to March 31st, 2020. Oh, I jumped a slide here. There. Our 10 local committees, powered by countless volunteers, continue to be the champions of our advocacy work. In Burnaby, for the first time, our local committee took the mayor for a bike ride to highlight the needs for safe and complete cycling infrastructure. In Delta, on our committee's request, the council approved plans to do a cycling infrastructure study and has allocated a budget of $50,000 for this study. We consulted with the Township of Langley to amend the subdivision and development servicing bylaw to include protected bike lanes on all arterial roads. In Maple Ridge and Pitt Meadows, we hosted many events including social rides, in an effort to encourage more new riders to start cycling and come join us for pizza and beer, always a good excuse. In New Westminster, we have been building community ties with allies such as the school board, the teachers union, Sustainable Transportation Advisory Committee, and Force of Nature Alliance, to name just a few. On the North Shore, our committee has been working hard to make presentations of our goals to the City and District of North Vancouver and get their agreement on the need to prioritize the 3 cycling routes identified by the committee members. In Surrey, we continue to push the authorities to ensure that active transportation should be included as an integral part of all new projects, like the Surrey-Langley SkyTrain and the Portola Bridge. And in the City of Vancouver, we continue to stay engaged with the Park Board and the city's engineering and planning teams to develop a long-term strategic development planning process. I have highlighted merely a few accomplishments of our local committees. And as I shamelessly boast of these accomplishments, none of these would have been possible without the leadership of our local committee chairs and the tireless work of countless committee volunteers across Metro Vancouver. Many of them are attending this meeting today. Thank you. If we were in a room, I would have asked everyone to clap for you. I would like to invite all of you to attend the local meeting in your neighborhood. We can greatly benefit from your unique expertise and your lived experiences to make cycling better for everyone. You can find more information at bikehub.ca. In addition to the hard work of our local committees, Hub staff and board members continue to push for reforms as well. We are asking the provincial government to dramatically increase funding for active transportation from under $2 currently to at least $23 per person per year on cycling infrastructure and education. Hub Cycling provided feedback as a stakeholder in a number of provincial and regional engagement efforts, including the provincial budget for 2021, redevelopment of BC Ferries Terminal, BC Active Transportation Design Guide, and TransLink's Transport 2050 plan. Hub representative now regularly meets with the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure staff as a member of the external advisory stakeholder group. As Bowenma mentioned earlier, we were able to chip away and make minor improvements to our Motor Vehicle Act, but there is still a lot of work to be done in order to reform this outdated act. We need your support and we will reach out to you. Our Ungap the Map initiative have helped fill more than 160 unique fixes. There were small fixes, but they made cycling better for people in that community. It also helped us engage with communities around Metro Vancouver to identify more than 750 gaps in our cycling network across Metro Vancouver. This is something that our advocacy work can greatly benefit from. For the last decade, Hub Cycling had steadily expanded its event programs, encouraging and promoting bike-friendly fun for all ages and abilities across Metro Vancouver. Last year was no different. Both spring and fall bike to work weeks saw a strong turnout. Nearly 17,000 people registered to participate, completing more than 57,000 trips and collectively cycled almost 900,000 kilometers. That is more than 22 trips around this planet. Just a fun fact. More than 3,400 people biked to work for the first time, an 87% increase from spring 2018. Hub's fourth annual Bike the Night celebration is a fun, unique way to help people get more comfortable to ride bikes at night. The event last year kicked off with a public outdoor festival with music, giveaways, free bike repairs, and information about cycling in the city. The number of people who rarely or never use lights was reduced by 60% by participating in this event. And 740 participants out of the 4,450 that participated were kids. A record-breaking number of students took part in Bike to School last year. And the schools were encouraging students to bike, walk, and roll to school. In our event reporting survey, 93% of schools reported that most students biked to school during the week that they normally don't otherwise. More than 11,000 students across 124 elementary schools made almost 33,000 trips during Bike to Work Week. Bravo. In 2019, Bike to School program provided cycling education courses to over 10,000 Metro Vancouver youth. It might not appear to be a big number, but this is a scale unheard of anywhere else in Canada. The next biggest youth cycling education program, run by Willow, Quebec, only works with 3,600 students throughout the province. This is a salute to our very dedicated and hardworking bike education team. This year, Hub embarked on Everyone Rides Grade 4-5 pilot program. This program, funded by the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, aims to deliver cycling education to elementary school children across Metro Vancouver, Kelowna, and Victoria. However, courses have been delayed to fall 2020 due to COVID-19. We aim to expand this program to ensure that moving forward, every child in elementary school across the province receives a bike education. In a major accomplishment, together with TransLink, we released the first ever benchmarking the state of cycling in Metro Vancouver report. Hub Cycling and TransLink engaged with 21 local municipalities, 1 electoral area, and 1 Treaty First Nation to develop a framework for classifying the nature and comfort levels of different cycle routes across Metro Vancouver. The report notes trend related to the rates at which people living in Metro Vancouver are cycling, documents rates of collision involving people cycling, and details the extent to which cycling supportive policies and practices are in place. The State of Cycling report received high media, government, and academic attention and is now informing further cycle network planning across the region. The annual report, this presentation mostly talks about everything we did till March 31st of this year. However, I want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about what happened since March 31st. Like everybody else, COVID-19 pandemic crippled our organization, and it will leave a lasting impact. It completely changed the way we work, but it will not change the work we do. While the demand for cycling continues to increase and more new riders are cycling these days, the financial resources available to deliver programs needed to support new riders continues to shrink. During these difficult times, the unwavering support of my entire board in general and our operations committee, which includes our president, Derek, treasurer, Matthew Alexander, and Ty Selvey, was paramount to withstand the financial impact of the pandemic. Years of prudent budget planning by our executive director, Erin, and support from the provincial and federal programs ensured that we were able to retain all our core staff and continue to work on this mandate of getting more people cycling more often. As Jeff mentioned, it is one of our strategic goals for the next 5 years that we serve people underrepresented. We have made small strides in ensuring that we collaborate with peoples of the First Nations, underprivileged and racialized communities. Our Delta Local Committee, for example, continues to work with Elder Ruth Adams from the Tawasan First Nation in their effort to develop the Great Blue Heron Way Trail system. We have funding in place to start delivering our first bike education program to children in the Salawit Nation. We also had plans to work on an Indigenous urban youth cycling skills and community asset mapping project in Vancouver. Both these programs, however, have been suspended due to pandemic. We will continue to our work to include First Nations community members in our decision-making as well as program delivery efforts. Cycling advocacy still very much serves predominantly privileged members of our society. For far too long, our cities had policies in place that ensured that racialized community members were systematically excluded from the decision-making process or had a seat on the decision-making table. Most positions of power and decision-making were and are still held by white people. Look at your screen. Do you see a representation of the community we live in? Sadly, no. It is clear we have a lot of work to do, have much to learn, and we are likely to make mistakes on the way. But these are uncomfortable conversations we must have, and our actions need to be louder than our words. We must create space on the leadership table if we ever hope to have racialized members of a community as equals in the decision-making process. I encourage our members, all of you, and broader cycling community to continue to challenge us, to support us, and join us in this journey to make our communities more inclusive. As an organization, we have made tremendous efforts to bring women on the decision-making table. Erin has been our executive director for past 6 years. Hub's success over these years shows that not only women can be successful in leading an organization, but they can do an excellent job while juggling motherhood. And to that end, I'm super excited to inform that Erin has just returned from her maternity leave, and I can put all my burden back on her shoulders. Thank you for the many ways you make cycling better, and I'm gonna now invite Erin to say a few words to our members.
Thanks, Nav. What a year to be off on maternity leave. A lot has changed at Hub and in the world in general, and I am happy to be back and feel more strongly than ever about the positive impacts of cycling. I want to give just a huge thanks to Navdeep, who stuck with the acting executive director role through an extension that was a surprise and a global pandemic. He steered the Hub cycling ship through uncharted waters and led the team to some really important innovations and pivots that continue to get more people cycling more often. And all of this despite the disruption in everyone's lives. I was so pleased to see noteworthy accomplishments that Nav had been talking about and that I've learned about in the last little while about the award-winning and groundbreaking State of Cycling report, massive growth in school cycling education and the provincial commitment to everyone rides grade 4-5. So many more cycling gaps filled. We've seen some burgeoning business demand for better end-of-trip cycling facilities and more regular and frequent collaborations with all levels of government and decision makers, the most that we've ever had as an organization. Thank you to all of the volunteers, staff, board that made this possible and helped us survive a very challenging time and continue to work away at that as things are changing constantly. I look forward to working with you all, including the board members that are elected today. And I think we will continue this really important work that has such huge potential to improve quality of life amid all of the COVID-19 constraints and also to help combat the escalating impacts of climate change that are literally in our face and our lungs right now. Our work is more important than ever, and I'm energized to fulfill that potential. I really look forward to leading Hub Cycling in some new directions that our world is demanding right now and serving more diverse communities through that work. I'm so proud to be part of this organization and thank you for being a part of it too. Back to you.
Awesome, thank you, Erin. Great to have you back and to have both you and Nav working in the organization. So looking forward to seeing what we can do. We have scheduled a chat check-in here, but I'm not getting any specific chat questions. So we are going to have another one. If there's something that's on your mind, you can throw it in there for the next one. And if you have anything to say that isn't a question, but you wanted to make a statement, that's an option for you as well. So moving on in the agenda, we're making great time here. Back to Jeff Lee for the Regional Advisory Committee update. Jeff, are you prepared for us?
I am. And this time, no slides, so I'm just going to speak for a couple of minutes. The board has 3 standing committees. There's an operations committee, which supports operation issues with the executive director. There's a development committee that worries about functioning of the board and organizing the AGM. And the action committee of the board is the Regional Advisory Committee. And this is a group of board members with a focus on regional advocacy, policy development for the organization, and support of our 10 local committees who are all doing action work all around Metro Vancouver. And Regional Advisory Committee, which we refer to as RAC or RAC, the RAC board members over the past year include Genevieve, Matt Strand, Julie, Shireen, Neil, and me. And RAC is involved in key infrastructure projects around Metro Vancouver, is responsible for drafting policy recommendations, which are then approved by the full Hub Cycling Board. And our work to support and strengthen local committees includes work by the Local Committee Action Group, which is part of RAC. And I'm going to give an update on each of those 3 areas of focus over the past year. In terms of advocacy, RAC has continued the discussion with the BC government on the recently adopted BC Active Transportation Strategy, now talking about implementation issues. RAC has continued to provide input and specific suggestions for the BC Active Transportation Design Guide, which was recently issued. That document helps define standards so all municipalities and other agencies can work towards providing consistent, quality infrastructure that is safe and comfortable for users. RAC participated in and supported the State of Cycling Benchmarking Project, which was completed by Hub staff. This project created standard definitions for cycling infrastructure, mapped and cataloged that infrastructure, and published a report. And we're going to build on that state of cycling data for more research work in the coming term. RAC or RAC maintains relationships with TransLink for issues such as multimodal connectivity, bikes on transit, bike parking at transit hubs, TransLink assets like the BC Parkway, and TransLink's new major bikeway network, which is undergoing a revision. We've provided input to TransLink's Transportation 2050 initiative, which is a 30-year vision for how transportation will be changed in Metro Vancouver. Participated in some consultation on the George Massey Crossing project, which is the second round of consultation to replace the George Massey Tunnel. And that was specifically about active transportation features. And that's an important link. Regionally, it will allow people to get from the Vancouver Centre through to Tsawwassen Ferry Terminal, for example. We participated in workshops for improvements to Metro Vancouver regional greenways. There's a long-term vision for completing that greenway network. We worked on consultations with the developer for Sapperton Green in New Westminster, and that's a single project, but what's important about it is it abuts the Central Valley Greenway, and that project and that development is going to include improvements to the Central Valley Greenway, which is a major upgrade. Following our discussions with TransLink staff, TransLink has now adopted a new policy and accommodates e-bikes on bus bike racks, something that they formerly did not permit. And finally, on advocacy, we attended the BC Parliamentary Roundtable on active transportation and had a chance to contribute there. In terms of policy development, we completed revisions to our Hub Cycling e-bike position that recognizes new BC government definitions around e-bikes, including the designation for Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3 e-bikes. We made a submission to the BC government provincial budget team, pushing for more funding for active transportation. And we developed policy recommendations on the use of rigid bollards on multi-use paths. In terms of the support for local committees, we provided support on specific projects, typically those with regional significance, working with local committee reps from those areas. Through our local committee action group, we hosted 2 all-committee meetings, and those are peer network groups sessions where the local committee members can get together and share ideas across. They have a lot in common across the different areas, and a lot of this is just sharing ideas and best practices. We have liaison meetings with the local committees, and it's just supporting them in their work. We also worked, sorry, I should say the local committee action group worked with local committees to ensure that all committees have an annual action plan for their own committee in support of our longer term goals. If you have any questions or comments about RAC, please see me or any other member of the board after the meeting or send a message and be happy to discuss in more detail. Back to you, Derek.
Great, thank you, Jeff. We're going to move on to the next item on our agenda, and that's Matthew Alexander, our treasurer, with the financial report for the 2019-2020 year. Take it away, Matt.
I'm surprised we're on time here, Derek. Nice work. It's moving along well. Okay, so yeah, as Derek mentioned, Matt Alexander, I'm the treasurer on the board, and I been with the board now for 3 years, and I've been in the treasurer position for 2. So I've got 2 objectives in my section. One is reviewing the financial statements from 2019 and 2020. Then I also wanted to just do a quick touch base on post-COVID financials. Nothing too deep there, but I imagine that's questions that people might have around how we're looking after the pandemic. And then we do some administrative work around just appointing auditors for 2020 and 2021 for our next fiscal year. So I'm going to take a shot at presenting my screen here. You can get a thumbs up, Derek, that you can see me or see the screen.
I'm seeing a thumbs up from Neil there. I can't see it, but that might be my screen.
Okay.
Is everybody else able to see it? Corey's got you a thumbs up.
Just as a note, within the AGM package, the financial statements are linked there as well if people want to be following on along at home. So, but in terms of the financial statements, just a quick reminder, this is a fiscal year, so it's not necessarily related to the calendar year. And our fiscal year runs from April 1st to March 31st. So April 1st, 2019 to March 31st, 2020. So a lot of the information here is pre-pandemic. So it's before a lot of the financial impacts from COVID-19 hit. This is kind of a view of how things were before. So starting off, just wanted to jump in looking at kind of 2 main parts of these financial statements. First, looking at the balance sheet. So wanting to, or statement of financial position. So for people's references, this is a point in time, a look at what our total assets and liabilities are as an organization. So quick call out here was one, this is a strong looking balance sheet in that the assets are significantly over the liabilities. So I think in terms of looking at the organization and understanding whether or not we can meet our current obligations in the next year, given that our assets are 3 times higher than our liabilities, it gives us some assurance that we're going to be able to hit those liabilities. So that is one major positive on the balance sheet side. And one kind of note when looking at the balance sheet is there is some negatives here or some cause for concern. One specific one is the cash balance has been dropped from 2019. So quick just note on that, we partially part of that variance is really coming from our deferred revenue also decreasing. So we have fewer obligations in 2020, so we have less of a cash balance to deal with those obligations. So that accounts for the majority of that cash decrease year over year. And then another portion is coming from the cash used from operations during the year. And I'll go in a little bit more detail on the next component onto the income statement piece. So this is the view of the balance sheet. Again, the big kind of call out is assets far exceeding liabilities, so puts us in a strong financial position. So moving forward to the income statement. So again, for reference, I'll try to make this a little bit smaller for people. For reference, this is a 12-month period. So this is looking at all of our financial expenditures and all the revenues that we received in that fiscal period over that 12-month period. So I think a couple of call outs here. One, revenue is 1.267 million, which means we have a fairly good scope or ability to influence with that type of a revenue base. And it's also increasing by about 4% year over year. So nice to see that the organization is still growing its revenues and being able to expand the programs that we're able to offer. A couple other notes just on the revenue side, just in terms of where our funding is coming from. And I think the annual report does a good job of showing this, but a good portion is coming from government revenue. That's coming from provincial and municipal, regional and provincial governments. That makes up about 56% of our overall funding. And then the second big piece is really coming from private donations and private funding. So the private donation and private funding make up about 34%. A big portion of that coming from sponsorship, and then another big portion coming from just individual and corporate donations that we're able to gather from our membership and all the people that support what Hub is doing. So that gives a good overview of the revenue piece. In terms of the expenses, a couple call outs here. One is that the bulk of our expenditures, as one might expect, is involved with staffing. So 75% of our expenses are staffing based. Just in terms of executing on all of the programs that we're delivering. The other large portion is on programs, so just any of the overhead costs that we need to actually deliver on the programs. It makes up about 16%. I think one key piece in terms of looking at the income statement that I want to focus in on is the amount of overhead that we're actually allocating, or that makes up the expenses that within the organization. So currently, of all our expenses, only 8.5% is going to overhead within the organization. So I think that's a positive sign that the money that we're getting from all the different revenue sources is really going into executing on the programs that we're delivering to the people within BC. So I think if we try to benchmark ourselves to other nonprofit organizations, having that overhead percentage being under 10% is a strong sign that we're being efficient with how we're spending our money, and that the money that we're getting is going back to executing on those projects. So one last call out here is, if you look at the very bottom, you can see that there is we are in a loss position this year. So, which is obviously a big swing from how we ended off last year. Just a quick call out in terms of that loss. One, we're a nonprofit, so we're not looking to be generating profits year over year. We're trying to make sure that we have cash in the bank and that we're fulfilling our mandates. So it's not necessarily an issue for us. I think other pieces of context that are important is to realize that loss, a big part of that loss was the State of Cycling research project that was launched this year, where we had expenses over what we had anticipated. I think it's important to realize that we can foresee that having long-term impacts beyond just 2019 and 2020. So it's something that I think we're comfortable in terms of the investment we made this year, having a longer-term impact, and not necessarily something we have to be worried about that overrun in terms of expenditures. Other component making up that loss is just looking at the investment we made in the Bike Tonight part of the program that we went forward with. So I think looking at those two components that were very successful, I think it makes sense that there is some overage in terms of expenses over the revenues that we have. Just also looking at this, if we look at the trajectory going forward into 2021 and beyond, we don't see this creating a problem for us. We're not these are kind of one-off overages that we're not expecting to have in future years. So that is the quick summary of the financial position and financial review for this year. Just wanted to quickly touch on post-COVID-19 and really give people a quick update on terms of what actions were taken since the pandemic. And I think to Nav's credit and to a lot of the management team at Hub, it took some pretty quick action to make sure that our financial position was quite strong throughout COVID. So I think one of the major things that we were able to do is secure the federal wage subsidy, which helped our financial position. We're able to receive some interest-free loans as part of some government aid packages. So those were key in shoring up our financial position. And then we've also made operational adjustments within our cost structure to make sure that we're going to be in a strong financial position. So I think with all of those moves, the outlook throughout the next year is quite positive from a financial perspective. We're not in a position where money is the only thing we have to focus on. We've dealt with that issue, and we can think about executing on some of the more strategic objectives that we have. So it's always a good position to be in. So in terms of questions, I'm imagining there's some questions. I don't know if we can, Derek, if you want to pass them my way. Or Corey.
I don't see anything specific to the financial statements. We'll do a check-in. Well, this is our check-in, yeah. Sounds like there was some questions, but you've already answered them because you're a fantastic treasurer.
I've never done one of these without having a bunch of questions afterwards. So
do you see there's someone that in the chat right now? Can you see those ones, Matt?
Oh, let me take a look. Oh, I don't think I can see the chat at this point.
Well, let's we've got a motion. Google Doc for questions. Yeah. We've got a motion for the auditors, and while you're doing that, Matthew, we'll have a look and see if there's any questions. So you've got a motion, yep. I think.
Yeah. So part of the AGM process, we need to reach out to membership and look to appoint the auditors for 2020 and 2021. So put forward a motion to appoint Manning Elliott LLP, who are same auditors this year for the next fiscal year.
So that's the motion, is to bring in the auditors for the 2020-2021 year. I'll second that, and we'll have a vote. And Matt, we do have a couple questions, and I'll pass them on to you when we're done this vote. Okay, and we're about 30 seconds into the vote. Almost 80% of folks have voted, and now at over 80%, and we've got 100% approval. So we'll have that as an approved motion. So you've got your auditors for next year, Matt. First question for Matt: subcontracting doubled year over year. Can I understand more about that? And I think a fair bit of that may relate to professional specialists who came in for Bike the Night and our research project where we were using subcontractors. Matt, do you have anything to throw in to add?
Yeah, I think the state of cycling work required some subcontractors coming in, but I might put that over to NAB as well to just sense check that. That's my understanding of why the subcontractor line is up.
Yeah.
Hi everyone.
Go ahead, Nav, are you in there?
Yeah, the subcontractor expense was up in part because of the state of cycling research project. We had subcontracted people for that project, as well as Bike the Night. There is a big cost to contract out the services for traffic management for Bike the Night. And both those expenses are the reason why it went up. And
nice work, we're all on the same page.
Yes, and one additional expense is for our Everyone Ride Grade 4-5 pilot project. We contracted out services to deliver this programming in Kelowna and Victoria.
Okay. Okay, thanks. So there was a couple of other questions. One was website expense was 8,000 last year, but 23,000 this year. The question was that an anomaly, or do we expect this to be at that level in the future years? I think that was because we had some special projects. Nav, did you want to jump in on that?
Yes, that's correct. Last year we migrated our server to a hosting service within Canada, and there was a one-time cost to do that migration. And we also updated our Bike to Work Week tracking tool, which helps us track the trips during Bike to Work Week. Both of those are one-time expenses.
Okay. Another question from Michael. How long has this particular auditor been the auditor? Is there a process to review that appointment? We've had Manning Elliott for many years, since before my time. We did do a review when I was treasurer, looking at alternative suppliers, and they were found to be very competitive, if not the most competitive. They've been very good at giving us a good rate. So the answer is there is a process on occasion. It's not a formalized process, but if you happen to have somebody who's willing to give us a not-for-profit discount, we're always willing to hear that. Matt, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, and I think we could have a better process to review that each year. And I think, yeah, if people have good suggestions around it, be willing to take those.
Okay. We have a comment. We have a kudos to Matt. That's kudos for your thorough explanation of finances. So give yourself a pat on the back. With MEC being acquired by Kingsway Capital, is there expected shortfalls in the years to come? That's a good question. But we're not, at this point, it's too soon for us to say anything about what's going to happen with MEC. They have been a sponsor for ours for a while, but I think it's too soon for us to say what's going to happen there.
I have the same question today as well.
The other question is the auditor within the firm change over time? Matt, who in the period that you've been, has it been the same auditor?
It's been the same.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. We can have follow-up questions on those finance questions. Feel free to reach out to us, but we'll move on. We're doing okay for time. Most importantly, I think we're gonna pitch to the elections officer, and we're gonna get the results of the board of directors election, the most exciting, well, second most exciting after the finances part of the AGM. So Corey, are you there, and are you available to give us results?
Yes, can everyone hear me? Yeah, thumbs up. Okay, great. So we're just about to bring up a slide right now of our election results. I just wanted to say a big thank you to our board development committee. So Chantel, Derek, and Jeff, everyone worked really hard this year to make sure that as many candidates as possible were able to attend our board orientation so that they felt prepared to do their board applications, and you know, felt prepared to kind of get up and running when they joined our board. And of course, with COVID, most of that was done remotely, which added another challenge. I also want to thank Jeff Lee and the staff for working very hard to make sure that our voting software was running properly. That's the software that everyone was using to do our results. So This software company is based in Canada. It was one of the only ones that was based in Canada, and all of the results are independently certified from that company, and we received the results earlier today at noon. So if we could go ahead and show the slide, we can present the results. So the elected directors, Derek was re-elected as our president. And the other ones were Shireen Chin, who's our incumbent, Jeff Lee, also incumbent, and Ty Sylvie. And our new directors were Paul Kennedy, Michael Koski, Jean Lawson, and Will Skinner. So a big congratulations to everyone that was elected, and a big thank you to all the candidates for their time and interest. And you know, there's always work to be done at Hub, so we welcome everyone that was involved, even if they weren't elected, to continue working with us, because there's, like I said, lots of exciting things going on. And with that, I say congrats. I don't know if anyone has any questions about the board election this year.
We'll do a chat check-in after our motion to adjourn. But thank you, Corey, for doing that. Just for those folks who weren't elected, lots of opportunities to continue helping local committee work, but also I was chatting with Aaron about some knowledge philanthropy options. So there's definitely projects which you can assist with outside of being a board member, lots of volunteer opportunities within the organization. So pretty much right on time here, maybe a few minutes ahead of schedule. We're gonna adjourn so that anybody who needs to get offline can, but we're gonna leave the Zoom session open, the chat window open. There is a presentation from Burnaby Local Committee member Marino on a really exciting project that I'm quite excited about. So I encourage you to stick around to participate and hear about that. I think there's some work that we can do to move forward an important project in Burnaby. Nonetheless, I'm going to move that we adjourn the Hub 2020 annual general meeting, and I will need a seconder for that.
It's Jeff, I second.
Okay, Jeff Lee is second, and go ahead and vote, everybody. All right. Fastest vote yet to adjourn the meeting. Thanks, guys. We're at 90%, and we have a majority approval. Thanks, everyone, for participating. And we're going to pitch to Marino. Marino, tell us all about the exciting project in Burnaby.
There we go.
Marino's
okay, I'm unmuted. I couldn't do that for a second. So good evening, everybody. So my name is Moreno. I co-chair the Burnaby Committee with Kathy Griffin. I wanted to provide a brief update today, nothing special, no slides. A brief update to the membership on a key local project, one that has regional significance, and that's the Burnaby Mountain gondola project. So TransLink in 2011 began its engagement for this project, and we were there and provided feedback on the importance of bicycles and the role of the gondola in replacing transit bus services and how that would impact cycling. So now it's 2020 and TransLink is continuing their consultation. Over these years, TransLink's staff to this point have not developed sort of a firm proposal around cycling impacts that the proposed gondola would have on both the bicycle carrying capacity of the system relative to the transit service that it's set to replace, or what its policy on access to the system will be by people with bicycles. So at Hub Cycling, we feel that we should be pressing three main points to TransLink. The first is that TransLink commits that the proposed gondola will meet or exceed the bicycle carrying capacity of any replaced transit services, any replaced transit routes. Second is that the gondola maintains accessibility to people with bicycles during all its service hours. So no peak period, peak direction restrictions that we see on SkyTrain, for example. And third is that the cabins are configured to store bicycles horizontally. So no lifting a bicycle to hang it up. We want to make sure that everybody, whether you're a strong man or a smaller woman, can safely wheel your bicycle on the gondola cabins and transport it up the mountain without any strain. And so the Burnaby Committee, with the help of Hub staff team, Nav, I hear you're going to have a lot of free time now. So we'll circulate the survey link and guidance for feedback to our members within the next few days. Or feel free to take the survey now. Your feedback will be needed by the end of the month. So if you have any questions, I can try to answer them, but otherwise, I wanted to put that on your radar.
Thanks, Marino. That's I'm pretty excited about the gondola project. I think if done properly, it can be a great boon for everybody, including cyclists. So as mentioned, we'll keep the chat window open. We'll be monitoring that, but I'm going to sign off on my video at this point in time. We're going to have a check-in in the control room here, but thanks everyone for participating.